Good evening. First, to the questions. You gave us the illustration of the little Buddha statue. I have always looked at nature and the marvel of the universe as God made, as real. Am I only to know it also as the product of infinite intelligence, and that what I see is an illusion? To understand that clearly, you must understand that God is the only creative principle in all of this universe, and therefore all that exists is real. But the way we see it constitutes the illusion. God made mountains and valleys and seas, sun, moon, and stars, all of the plants that are in the ground, all the trees that grow, and all the fruit and all the animals. But you and I have never seen them. We have never seen God's creation with our eyes. What we see is our finite concept of that, and you can illustrate that in this way, that when you look out and see the sky sitting on the mountain, and you do see it, you know that it isn't true. You know that the sky is not there. That's an optical illusion. So you are seeing what doesn't exist. Or when you see the sky sitting on the ocean in the distance, the horizon, you know that isn't true. You're not seeing what God created at all. You are seeing what God created, but you are seeing it in an incorrect way. God created the sky and the sea. God created the sky and the mountain, but he certainly didn't create them touching each other as you would see it. And so it is that, don't think for a minute that when we look at each other that we see each other. We only see our concept of each other. And that is why, no, not why, but at least one of the reasons, that there can be beauty contests every year. Do you not see the only reason is because no two people can agree who is the most beautiful, because they do not all see the same thing? If everyone saw the same thing, there'd be no need of a contest. We'd all know who the most beautiful is, and we'd save all the money of those contests and just give it to the winner. But that's an impossibility, because even after the winner has been selected, half of the others don't believe it. Why? Because we are not seeing what is there. We are seeing our sense of what is there. And so it is with all creation. Do you have eyes, the Master says, and do not see? What did he mean by that? That you are only seeing physically, and yet you are not seeing what is actually there, because that takes an inner discernment. You perhaps all know the story of the past, present, and future. It illustrates this in a way. There was a man in a rowboat, and he was at this point, and that was here and now. But he went up the river, and he found himself here and now, and what was behind him was then and there. It was the same place, but it was no longer here and now. It was there and then. And this place over here, that was in the future and not yet. When he got here, all of this was in the past. Yet it was all right here in the same place. But it was past, and it wasn't here, it was there. And then we're told that while they were trying to reason this out, two men, someone went up in a tree. And he noticed that here and here and here were all here and now. He could behold them all. So time and space are illusions. You can't see that with your eyes or hear it with your ears, but inwardly you know it's true. Those of you who have been up 20-odd thousand feet in planes and have seen 500 square miles or 1,000 square miles around you know that you're instantaneously within sight of 1,000 miles, and down here we're limited to a few streets. We are not seeing what exists. We're seeing some finite sense of what exists. And that is why when you look at nature, remember this: the reality of it is in the invisible creative principle. We use that illustration in the Kailua series, where we were looking out of my doors out into the back garden, which is all ringed with coconut trees. And we noticed a coconut tree full of coconuts. And right next to it, one that had all of its coconuts taken away. And so if we were to judge by appearances, we would say that one tree was barren and no good, and the other one was fruitful. But that is only because we were seeing with the outer eye. If you were looking through the eyes of knowledge, you would know that right there and then, in what seemed to be a barren tree, there was a life force taking place in there, forming a whole new crop of coconuts. And if you just waited a few weeks, a few months, that tree would be just as full and fruitful as the other, showing they were both alive and both fruitful, but one at one particular moment did not show this forth to our eyesight. So it is always, if you judge by appearances, you're going to see what isn't there. You're going to see barren men and barren women in a barren world, and all the time it isn't true. There is a life force going on, which is the reality of us, which is the real nature. And what appears outwardly are the temporary forms which come and go. The only way that you can grasp this clearly is to be able to look at your own garden, probably at this time of the year or next month, and see how barren it is, and see if you believe it. See if you aren't fully aware of the fact that in a few months from now you'll have a beautiful garden of colorful flowers. And why? Because what you're seeing is an illusion. What you're seeing isn't true. What actually is going on there are just millions and millions of wonderful flowers coming into expression. But right now in the invisible realm, soon to be in the visible. Never negate this universe. Never just look at it and call it an illusion. It isn't the illusion. Our sense of it is the illusion. It is reality. I've said this over and over. This is the temple of God. This body is the temple of God. It's not an illusion. But what you're seeing is an illusion, because you're not seeing it as it is. You are seeing your idea of it. That's all that you're seeing. And the way we know that definitely is that when I was in the Belgian Congo, at one end of a city were the camps of the giants. There are men and women about 7 feet tall. And naturally, when I was there, I was a little pygmy among them. You could see that too. They couldn't hide it. But when I was on the other side of town, where the little dwarfs have their homes, I was a giant. You see? And now, what was the truth about it? Well, there is no truth about it. Each was seeing out of their particular eyes. A couple of years ago in London, one of our students came over with her son, whom I hadn't seen in 4 years. Meantime, he sprang up from that big to that big. And then when he saw me, he looked and said to his mother, "Oh, hasn't Joel gotten small?" Now you see, I wasn't the illusion, but his vision was illusory. That's all. All of us with radios and television sets can't help hearing Oral Roberts. Are those actually instantaneous healings? Frankly, I couldn't answer yes or no. The only one thing that I do know is that many men who are in a position to know claim that about 20% of those healings are permanent. And I couldn't give you that on my word of honor. I can only give you that as the word that I have heard from those who are in that same type of work. I know several of those evangelists who do the same type of healing, and I have even been present where some of it was done, and I've actually seen a whole row of men and women with crutches and canes who were badly crippled within just a few minutes leave down those canes and crutches and get out and walk. But at the end of the service, they all had to go back to using him to get out of the hall. In other words, there was an element of, we call it suggestive healing. Now, you're well, aren't you? Now, you feel better, don't you? Now don't you feel better? And before you know it, you're saying yes, and really feeling it, too. Whereas it's nothing but a temporary suggestion. Now, in the case of Oral Roberts, I have no way of knowing how much of that is instantaneous or how much of it is permanent, and I don't suppose anybody else except those around him actually know. One thing is certain. It isn't spiritual healing, it is suggestive healing. It is healing by suggestion. And for this reason, it is supposed to be God healing through a man. Now, certainly you've been truth students long enough to know that that can't happen. Wouldn't God be a monster if he'd heal a few people through a man and let all the rest of us suffer? Wouldn't that be terrible? Wouldn't it be awful if he healed some of them through a man and not all the rest of them that come there? No. No, there's no such thing. Spiritual healing has nothing to do with God healing the sick. Spiritual healing has to do with knowing the truth, that since God is infinite, his universe is already perfect and needs no healing, and that which appears to the practitioner as sin, disease, and death are known as nothingness. And that's what prompts the healing, not God. Jesus didn't say a single word about God healing. Jesus merely said, what did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk. Jesus didn't say anything about God. He said, stretch forth thine arm, thine hand. Jesus said nothing about God. He said, open thine eyes. It was the truth that Jesus knew that brought about what we call healing. And that is the way healing is done today. Not by invoking the aid of a God for one, while God lets all the rest of us suffer. What a horrible God that would be. But the matter of truth is that in the kingdom of God, no one is suffering, no one is sick, no one is sinful, and no one's ever died. There is no such thing in the kingdom of God. If you ever have a moment of inspired illumination, you will find that in the entire kingdom of God, there isn't a sin, a disease, or a death. You'll know that you're in the presence of life eternal, and that everybody of the past, present, and future are also there, full and alive and complete and perfect, and among them is you. It is only when you come down from your illumination and look out through these limited eyes that we see what man has done unto us, what man-made laws and man-made beliefs have done unto us, what the hates and envies and jealousies and spiritual darknesses of the world have done to us. God hasn't. None of this has happened in God's kingdom. Not a soul in God's kingdom is lost or ever has been lost. Not a soul in God's kingdom has ever been sick or ever died. All of this has happened in what we call our man-made universe. And as a matter of fact, many of our ills we're doing to ourselves, just by the food we eat and some of the things we drink. Don't ever forget that. that if you ever ate properly and drank properly, half of the ills of your flesh would drop away even without spiritual help. That would only be on the physical plane, but nevertheless it's so. Now, so why blame God for our ills or think that God can heal our stupidity while we go right on poisoning ourselves? No. Give God credit for this. God is love. God is infinite intelligence. And in God's kingdom, there isn't a single sign of sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, or wars. All of that goes on in man's violation of law. And that we're coming to in tonight's lesson. God is the power to bring balance of positive and negative thinking. Isn't that so? But now that's something that I would know nothing about, since the authority for our work is the Bible. And in the Bible it says that thinking never makes it so. Not positive thinking or unpositive thinking. As a matter of fact, that when you think not, that's the time when the Christ comes. So it would seem from the Bible that thinking is an error, whether it's positive or negative, because even thinking good thoughts can't make a white hair black or add 1 cubit to your stature. And if by thinking you can't do the least of these things, and that's even by good thinking, how are you going to do the rest? No, in the kingdom of God, in the spiritual work, there's no such thing as thinking, no such thing as positive thinking, or no such thing as negative thinking, because it says definitely that God's thoughts are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are positive and negative, and they're erroneous whichever way they are. But God's thoughts are neither positive nor negative, they're spiritual. And that is something that cannot be discerned with the mind, and that's why all of the psychologists and psychiatrists have been able to make a 100% complete, perfect failure of their practice. None of them ever achieve 99% failure. No, because never one of them achieves 1% success. Not one even claims it. They all know that they have a perfect and complete failure. Why? Because they're working with the mind. And it's an instrument of good and evil. And it can be good today and evil tomorrow, and it can be evil today and it can be good tomorrow, and nobody can control it. It is what it is. When you get above the realm of the mind, and you come to people who really and truly live and move and have their being with God, then you come to a place where these failures don't exist in that degree. Oh, some yes. Only because we have not yet risen at that complete state of spiritual living where either the practitioner can do the work all alone, or where the patient can allow it to be done to him, because they too insist on their worldly ways. But never believe this for a minute, that thinking has anything to do with the spiritual life. It hasn't one single bit to do with it. Our power of thought is an avenue of awareness. With our thought, we can know that we are here. With our thought, we can enjoy the beauties of nature and the bounties of nature. We can behold all things through our thought, but positive thinking or unpositive thinking can't create or make a white hair black or add a cubit to your stature or do the least of these things or the greatest of these things, for your thoughts are not power, only God's. And fooling around with the human mind will always be a troublesome aspect. Now, the note that I have for tonight, I have 2 notes, and one of them touches on that very subject. You cannot reach God through the mind. That is why metaphysical practice that has to do with affirmation and denial alone can't be successful. Never can be. That doesn't mean you can't have a healing once in a while, because you can have healing through suggestion. You can have healings through belief. You can exchange or substitute a good belief for a bad one, and thereby change a condition of the body. That is in no wise a healing. That is merely a temporary change of conditions. Spiritual healing, permanent healing, has to come through a faculty of the soul. The Master is very clear that I can of my own self do nothing, the Father within me doeth the works. And if he meant by that mind or thought, he would not have said, who by taking thought can accomplish anything. So he wasn't talking about thought when he said Father. Father is spirit, or what Paul termed the Christ. None of that has to do with mind. That has to do with spirit. That has to do with soul. That has to do with that which the mind cannot even grasp. And Paul made that very clear. The things of God can never be known by man. The things of God are foolishness to man. Why? Because man is using his mind in an attempt to understand spirit, and it can't be. A mystic apprehends truth because he has risen above mind, above thought, and is able to sit in an inner communion and receive impartations from within. A mystic doesn't make up thoughts, and he doesn't make up statements, and he doesn't write books. A mystic receives impartations from within. When I speak of mystics, I'm speaking of everyone who is responsible for a measure of truth reaching the human mind, whether it begins with Krishna, or Lao Tse, or Buddha, or Jesus, or John, or Paul, Moses, Elisha, Elijah, Isaiah. None of those men made up out of their heads what they wrote. None of those men just sat around making up sentences. Those were men of inspiration. They had the faculty and gift of communion, of inner grace, whereby they were able to sit and all of a sudden receive this impartation of truth, which has come down to us through all of the ages, in spite of the fact that there were no books to carry them down to us. Just a few manuscripts here and there, and the rest was word of mouth. But their words never died, because nobody ever made up those words. Those words were inspiration that came from a source within themselves, and a source that we recognize as God or the soul of man. Now, God speaks to man just as clearly as man speaks to man. When the thinking apparatus is quiet. Can you imagine a great artist, a great composer, making up music and paintings and poetry? Can you imagine such a thing? Can you imagine an Edison making up his inventions out of his head? Can you imagine a Wright brothers finding this secret of the air through a thinking process? These are things that flow into these men. Music flows into the soul of a composer, poetry into the poet. If you have ever read the mystical literature of England and the United States, you'd know that those men can't make it up, and you know it especially by the fact that the divine messages are so similar all down through the ages, as each one of these people have touched the same source. The same revelation come through in different words, different language, different symbols, but always the truth is the same. And no man makes this up. Nobody could make up such things as the truth parts of the Bible embody. The rest, the history, yes, of course. Anybody can write the history of the Bible. But actually, to make a discovery of things that are unknown to man, that has to come from a divine source. For instance, this is the Master speaking. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Now, do you really believe that a man made that up? Do you think that Jesus Christ invented such an idea as resisting not evil, or giving double for double of the evils of this world rather than resist? Heavens, no. That is a divine inspiration that comes from within, revealing to him a spiritual truth. Now see how foolish it must sound. Here you are in a society where if a wrong is done you, the first thought comes to your mind to go to law and sue. That's the very first thought that comes to mind, and that's considered sensible. Now just think that Jesus Christ were to walk into this room and say, I say to you, stop your lawsuits. And if anybody wants to take your property, let them have it. If anybody wants your home, let them take it. If anybody takes your automobile, let them have it. And if they decide to come in and get your jewelry, let them have that too. And then look around and see if you can't meet them and give them a few extra things besides. Now that wouldn't make sense to you, but that's what it says here in plain English. And you have no way at this moment of knowing but what he has the right idea. You have no way of knowing but what you might benefit twice over by obeying that passage, rather than resisting and going to court about it. You have one single way of knowing, because you haven't tried it. Yet here it has been for 2,000 years in this book, and I know he didn't make that up. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. Now that's what they were taught in the old Hebrew faith, and you are taught the same thing today. As a matter of fact, your chaplains in your prison go right out, I don't mean your prison, I mean in your churches, go right out with your sons and husbands and brothers so as to be sure that you'll be protected while you're hating the enemy sufficiently. They'd say prayers for your boys so as to give them protection while they're doing a thorough job of killing the other fellow. You know that's true. That's the function of a chaplain, is to pray for your men so that he'll be protected while he's out doing what he's supposed to do, which is not love his enemy, hate his enemy, kill his enemy, maim his enemy. Now, he says, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Been seeing any of that over in the Suez Canal lately? Now you know better than that. Did Jesus make this up and become a fool for making up something that isn't true? Or did Jesus receive a divine inspiration from within that man never could think up, because man hasn't the quality to think that kind of thought? And you know the answer. It was a divine inspiration, and you haven't any way of knowing what would happen in the world if our nations actually obeyed this right here. You have no way of knowing what would happen right now if all of the Christian churches of the world passed a rule that they would be open every morning from 6 a.m. until 9 and from 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. so that all the people in the country could go in either before work or after and pray for the enemy. Forget all about praying for ourselves. Forget all about anything else. Just praying for the enemy. You have no idea what would happen. You're not in a position because we haven't done it yet. The only ones who are in a position to give you some inkling of it are those who have been through the wars and went through on that basis of every single minute loving the enemy, praying for the enemy, every single minute praying that the place whereon I stand is holy ground and every place the enemy stands is just as holy. Those are the ones who could come back and tell you. They could tell you the miracles that took place in their experience and the experience of some around them by following a definite daily program of praying for the enemy. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Even the publicans do the same. And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Ah, no, but you have to salute your enemy. You have to love them, not only which love you, but which hate you. Now, I bring this to your attention. When you abide by a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye, you are under the law. And the moment that you go on to the next paragraph and resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other, you are now under grace. No one ever need pray for grace. No one ever need pray for God's mercy. It's nonsense. You're not going to get it. Not while you're violating the law. But neither do you have to pray for it when you are not violating the law, because then you're under grace. And remember this. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. And as long as you are living that life, you are under the Mosaic law. Now don't forget that. And you're going to pay the penalty for it. All the penalties of the thou shalt and the thou shalt nots. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Now listen to why. That ye may be children of God. Now haven't you been wondering how you get to be children of God? You didn't have to. It was right there in the Scripture. That's how you get to be children of God. Stop living under the law and begin to live under grace. Can you do it? Oh, well, I tell you in advance that everybody will tell you it's impractical. You can't do it. It was all right for Jesus, but it won't do for you. But Jesus is our way shower. He's our way shower, but please don't follow the way that he shows you. Isn't it nonsense? But there it is. Take it from me. I also didn't make this up. And I also didn't get this out of a book. I read these books just as many years as you did without finding this. It had to come by inspiration. It had to come by revelation. We are under the law, and that means we're under the penalty. If we take a tooth for a tooth, we have a tooth for a tooth taken from us. If we insist on an eye for an eye, we have an eye for an eye taken from us. If we insist on praying only for our brethren and our friends, which we're told it profiteth nothing, but if we insist on that, we lose the divine grace that comes from praying for our enemy. So isn't it clear that there's only one way to be children of God? Don't be like some of the metaphysicians that walk around mouthing, I'm the child of God, I'm the child of God, I'm the child of God, I'm spiritual, I'm perfect, but oh how I hate the Russians and the Mohammedans and so forth and so on. Don't ever believe that you're a child of God while you're under the Mosaic law. You aren't. You are a child of God when you come under grace. But to come under grace means to give up all your human rights. You have to give up every single human right that you possess. And then you are under grace. It's difficult. It's well nigh impossible, except for the person who is determined that they will enter the kingdom of heaven without dying to get there. That they will come under grace and be able to say, I have overcome this world. You can't overcome this world while you're using the weapons of this world. If you live by the sword, you must die by the sword. That's the Mosaic law. How do you get above that law? By not using the sword to defend yourself. What you should do if another man comes at you with a gun, let him kill you. It's much better to be dead. Much better. Yourself than to kill somebody else. Because in dying, you will gain life eternal. You'll come under grace. But if you think that you're going to live by taking somebody else's life, you just haven't begun to suspect what the Christian teaching is. There is no way to live by taking another's life, whether in self-defense or in protection of your home or your honor. There is no way ever that you will find life eternal through another's death. There is no way that you will ever find profit through another's loss. Don't ever believe it. We have the record in this country of a man who attained $100 million in one day. Of course, in order to get it, he had to call out the militia at one time and have some of his fellow workers shot down because they were striking for $1.50 a day. And rather than give it to him, he had the militia called out to shoot them. And he won. And his company was so prosperous that he sold it one day for $100 million. Yes, but the last 20 years of his life he lived in such torment trying to give that away, and he couldn't. The interest mounted up faster than he could find ways to give it away, and he knew that he'd go to hell if he didn't die poor. He was just besieged with an inner guilt complex that wouldn't allow him to handle the money that he'd killed to get. We had another man who accumulated $1 billion by defeating competitors, by bankrupting them, by buying them out for nothing, by forcing them in a corner. What did he do with his $1 billion? He couldn't even eat a meal. Ended up 30 years of his life living on milk and crackers with $1 billion in the bank. Wouldn't you like to pass one of these nice restaurants with $1 billion in your pocket and no ability to eat what they had in there? I couldn't stand it myself. I'd enjoy the appetite and the ability to eat the meal first, and I think you would too if you knew in advance the penalty for that kind of getting. If you knew the penalty for trying to usurp what belongs to another, if you knew the penalty for withholding what belongs to another, you're under the law. And the law says that as ye sow, so shall ye reap. And Jesus Christ voiced that. A cosmic law. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. It's a Hebraic law. It's a Mosaic law. It isn't Christian. The Christian is grace. Law came by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. But not because you went into a church and said, I accept Jesus Christ. All this world by now, would all be under grace. You have to accept the teaching of Jesus Christ, which is, do not live by the sword and you won't die by the sword. Don't demand an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Learn to pray for your enemies. Learn not to use human weapons to gain what you want in life, but to depend on spiritual weapons, which is divine grace. You are never under grace, and that's what all this Sermon on the Mount is about. It's telling you so clearly that there are two ways of life: the way of the law and the way of grace. And there he's got them side by side. When thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, For they love to stand praying in the synagogues, standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut the door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and the Father which seeth thee in secret will reward thee openly. Now you see, the human way, the Mosaic way, is to go out into the churches where all the neighbors can tell you what a good Christian you are, and they see you, why, you go to church every Sunday, you must be a good Christian, and therefore you have their reward of their good opinion. But in doing it, you've lost God's grace, because it's definitely under the divine grace. You have no right to be benefiting by man's opinion of you. You should be benefiting by God's love. And that you can't get in the public, you can only get in the privacy of your own dwelling place, where you can go inside and speak with God within yourself. And the Father that seeth in secret will reward thee openly. It's the same here about almsgiving. If you do your alms openly, so that all your neighbors can say how liberal you are, oh, how charitable, how benevolent, it's true, you're benefiting by their good opinion of you, but all you're losing is God's grace. That's all. Just by making a display of your charities, you're losing God's grace. Because what we give isn't our own, it's God's. We have no right to be using God's blessings for our personal benefit or to build a reputation for ourselves. And so it is that what we give in secret is rewarded openly in the blessings that come to us. Of course, our neighbors may say we're stingy. Our neighbors may say we don't give. Certainly, the Board of Trustees of the church may not be able to see a check there from you to congratulate you. And they may even believe you're not giving it. But that's their worry, not yours. Yours is to be giving it and not to let it be known that you're giving it. Then you are handling God's funds in God's way, secretly and sacredly, and coming under God's grace. You will find that by making a study of the Sermon on the Mount, you will find all the things that you can do under the law and what the penalties are going to be for your fulfilling them. And then side by side you will see how to bring yourself under grace, so that you won't have to pray for grace, you'll be under grace. Not by what you mouth, but by what manner of living you are doing. Now, this thing about punishment, retribution, and reaping the evil for the evil we do has nothing to do with God. It's like this nature we were talking about before. God has nothing to do with your getting punished. You have to do with it by violating God's law. God is never punishing you. Your violation of the law is punishing you. But when you come under grace, then you are absolved. Now you're under God. Remember that the man of flesh cannot please God and cannot be under God's government. Who is the man of flesh? The man who lives by the human code of Moses. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Or seeking to live by the sword. Or seeking to invoke human weapons instead of spiritual armor, which is the Word of God. But ye are children of God. When? When you bless your enemies, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, then ye are the children of your Father which is in heaven. And that's all there is to this. It's a matter of law or grace. Choose ye this day whom you will serve. To live under the law, to live under grace. To live by love, and it profiteth you nothing just to love your friend and your neighbor. It profiteth you nothing just to pray for your relatives and your friends and your fellow countrymen. But to the disciples he said, ye must pray for your enemies. Watch the Sermon on the Mount. It is a guide to two ways of living. You can choose the one you like best, the law or grace. If you choose the law, you will temporarily have a little easier time of it because you will be conforming to common usage. You'll be going right along with the crowd. Be right in the swim. And to some measure you'll benefit by it. The only thing, the retribution in the latter days is terrible when these things start catching up with you. On the other hand, if you attempt to live by grace, you will find yourself out of step with this world. You'll find yourself peculiar. You'll find yourself sometimes taking losses that you're not entitled to. You'll find yourself sometimes suffering from injustices that you don't deserve. Doesn't deny that for a minute here. In fact, it encourages you to do those very things. Because in the end you'll find you're under God's grace, God's government, God's protection. God's will is being done in you, not the will of man. That's an entirely different life. Do you see now why the human scene is not the scene that God created? That is, the human scene as you see it outside of this room. Because out there isn't love. Out there isn't resist not evil. Out there isn't do not take up the sword. Out there are all those violations. Now you can't say God made that world. But if you look around in this room, you'll find that you're very much closer to God's kingdom. Right here in this room. Not because you're not resisting evil, because there isn't any evil in this room to resist. And if some did pop up its head, you'd have enough wisdom to remember what you've heard and not resist it. In this room, it is a very simple thing for everybody to pray for their enemies. While we are all together here in this one spirit and this one mind, this very place is holy ground. The Pentecostal experience can happen here at any moment. Why? Because we're here in love, and with enough love in us, not for each other. That's too simple. That's just baby stuff. But there's enough love in this room that if I were to ask it, everybody could close their eyes and begin immediately to pray for their enemy. And without any feeling that they were doing anything of an unusual nature. And that is because those who have been attracted to this room have been attracted for that very purpose, that they've come partway at least along that very line even before they heard these words. These words are just crystallizing what has already been suspected inside of you. And so it is that you would find it here very easy. When you get back in the world again, it won't be so easy. Because there again you'll be in an atmosphere of this world, and the mesmerism of it can sway you back into it very, very quickly. And that is why I say to our students, more especially our class students, we have books, we have recordings, we have teachers, and we have each other. Let us abide in all of these as many hours of every day as we possibly can. Because then we're under the influence of this spiritual message of love, of life. When we're in these writings, when we're in these recordings, when we're abiding in such messages as this, can we hate, can we envy, can we fear, can we lust, can we be greedy, can we be revengeful? You know you couldn't do it. It wouldn't be possible. And if you were in this atmosphere long enough, you'd eventually find you couldn't live outside of it. You just couldn't live in a society of hate. You'd have to live your life among true students and advanced true students who would come to the point of being willing to give up the world, that is, the weapons of the world, the hates and revenges of the world, and the get back at them of the world, and the cheating and the lying and the stealing of the world. You couldn't live in that atmosphere anymore. You couldn't do it. Now, there we have it. Out in the world, we're told, and we can't leave the world. The Master said that we must be in the world, but not of it. We have to be in it for the influence we can be to those who might be influenced by the Christ life, and even to be some kind of an influence among those who would find it impossible at this moment, but who, with enough of that rubbing of shoulders, of elbows, might eventually come around to it. Because I suspect that there are others here like myself who would have found all this very difficult to swallow at one time. I know how difficult it would have been for me if anyone had talked this way in my presence at a certain stage of existence. But by the continuous abiding in the books that brought these spiritual things to light, by the abiding in the Master's part of the Bible, by abiding in meditation, by beginning to see what blessings there are in spiritual healing and what it does to your own nature to be engaged in an activity like that, and then by doing the very same thing that I'm preaching about today, abiding in the company of those who are on this path. I don't know of any more wonderful period of my life than the 16 years that I was a Christian Science Journal practitioner. For I lived morning, noon, and night in the company of those engaged in that church work. And I don't mind telling you, they were marvelous people. Marvelous. They didn't all have the full vision, neither do we all have the full vision. Who's going to ask that? They were living consecrated lives up to the height of their understanding. They were living in the Bible, and they were living by it. They were living in the spiritual textbooks and living by it, up to the highest sense of their ability. And that's all I was doing. Only up to the highest sense. But what a blessing to come in contact for 16 years with people who are making a daily study of the Bible and of spiritual writings and spiritual books and spiritual magazines, and who are trying to live their life by demonstration instead of by force. Oh, I count those 16 years as among my greatest treasures, because they were the preparation for this. And it makes me able to say to you that if you will live in your books, your spiritual literature, your scripture, and live with your teachers and practitioners, and live with yourselves, your associates, in as close a communion as you can. I don't mean morning, noon, and night. I mean by occasional contacts in this room or any other room where you happen to be, where you can come together to love God supremely and love each other as yourself, unselfishly, with the idea not of getting, but of serving and of giving, of sharing. Heaven, you'll have the same type of life that I had, and that was a preparation for this, which has been even a greater life because it has given me a greater opportunity to serve. No. Do you want to be children of God? Live in the Scripture. But not live in the letter of it, because that killeth. Quoting it, mumbling it, using it for cliches to throw at everybody that comes along, will destroy your own soul. But find these passages and put them into effect. And moreover, and above everything, learn how to get into that silence where no thoughts intrude. And let these impartations come to you as they came to all of the masters that have lived on earth. Nobody is able to bring through truths such as these except by inspiration of the divine. Nobody is clever enough to make them up. Ah, yes, there are lots of writers making them up, but you're not living by those writers. Those writers just come, get published, and out go their books by the wayside. I'm speaking of those that live, those that continue to live, those that continue to have power, those that continue to spread. Those men's writings and those women's writings did not come by being made up or copied out of other books. They came by a divine inspiration, showing that it is possible for everyone who develops the listening ear to receive that inspiration in some measure. We would all receive it in spiritual messages such as these. Some will receive it in music, and some in poetry, and some in paintings, and some in magnificent books, literature, art of one sort or another. It isn't necessary that everybody be a metaphysical teacher or leader or practitioner to be under the grace of God. Oh, no. No, that grace shows itself forth in many, many different ways. I've told often about the man who built Golden Gate Bridge. After all the builders before him had tried and failed, or tried to find a way to do it and failed, and they knew, of course, he couldn't do it because they knew why they couldn't, but he did it. And afterward he was asked, how could you accomplish what these others couldn't accomplish? Well, he said, I got this knowledge of how to do this by prayer. He's a bridge builder, designer of bridges. Don't you think that's as much a God instinct as building a book? Certainly. That bridge is a living book. And so it is. It may only serve a purpose for so many years and then something else take its place, but it has served its purpose and is serving, and it's a good one, and it's a divine creation made humanly manifest. Well, I'm afraid that we have said our say. Thank you.